Hello, I'm Sudarshan, the Starshine Star. Welcome. I've got another juicy podcast here for you guys. I have a YouTube channel called It's the Dazzling of the Light, or you can just go to YouTube and type in at Sudarshana Starshine Star to access my over 250 clips there. It's pretty interesting, pretty juicy. I don't do the mundane and boring, so why not check it out? It's also pretty fun. And why not join my YouTube channel? It's free. I thank you in advance for liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell. Thank you so much. Today is a beautiful Friday. It is July 25th, 2025. I begin all of my clips with the 3 opening prayers in Sanskrit and Telugu, and they are short. And I do this to bless, uplift, purify, and protect you, me, and this clip. But before I do that, I'm going to command on the sacred blood of Jesus the Christ, Yeshua, to flow over all of us and all of our beloveds and this clip and this social media, to really protect and really bless and really sanctify and remove all negativity, all projected negativity, remove all satanic influence or attachments, all demonic influence or attachments, and just to really uplift all of us and all of our beloveds for the best and the highest. Thank you so much, Yeshua. Thank you so much. And I also call on the beautiful, sacred, holy presence of Mother Mary to be with us here in this moment, even though we know that Divine Mother, Father God is always with us, always. But we ask Mother Mary to be with us in this moment and to just flow her perfect, beautiful love, her unconditional love from her Divine Mother's heart over all of us and all of our beloveds, just to embrace us and to give succor and hope and peace to all, and especially to all who need it right now. And whenever I say that, but don't we always all need it? Of course we do. So thank you so much, Yeshua and Mother Mary. And now the prayers. Om, 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 Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahmam, Tasmahi Sri Guru Vena Namaha. Om Suklam Bharataram Vishnum Sashivarnam Chaktubhujam Prasanavaranam Dhyaye Sarva Vignopashantaye Om Bhurbuva Suvaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhago Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Wonderful. Well, this will be part 2 of a podcast I just put out the other day called Jeffrey Epstein's Niece, Anya Wick, Reveals and More! Exclamation point. I really recommend, if you didn't listen to part 1, to listen to that first, because when I say and more, I give a lot of information and reveals on that I think is pretty interesting. I think maybe this kind of piqued people's interest because part 1 is really taking off. I'm really surprised and thankful for all the viewers, as well as the likes and the comments. Thank you so much, guys. But because I did, if you go on my YouTube channel, I don't do playlists, but you can just type in the title of a clip I did a little while back called My Stepfather, the Most Famous Shaman on Earth. And I talk about him and reveal that he, even though he is the most famous on the Earth realm, as well as 2 out of 3 of my stepbrothers, they're just super famous and have oodles of best-selling books translated into almost every language on the earth. But as I reveal, his name is Don Miguel Ruiz, and Don is not his first name. That's a Spanish honorific. Don for masculine, Doña for feminine. And yes, I used to be Doña, but they are Luciferian. And he was my stepfather for decades, but I was not aware. I was super, you can call it, I was just brainwashed And I also really gaslit myself because, yes, many terrible things did happen, but I was always blaming myself for it. And really, it wasn't until February 2nd, 2019, when I was struck on my crown chakra by an etheric. It wasn't actual. I wasn't outside. I was in my kitchen. It was like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I got hit on my crown chakra by the divine, like a lightning strike hit me, and it knocked me to my knees on my kitchen floor. And in that moment, I got an instant, powerful download, not only about the truth about my stepfather and all of his family, but what has truly been allowed to run this world for thousands of years. It was just, the divine wanted me to know. I had some pieces of it, but I had been staying away from my stepfather and my stepfamily for some time, and but I didn't have this missing piece. Like I like to say a lot, in terms of like algebra, you can't figure out an algebraic equation if you keep putting in the wrong value for x. Like if you think x equals 2 and x is really 49, no matter how many times you keep going over and over and over it, you're not going to get the right answer. And I wasn't plugging in fully the right answer that my stepfather and his family and my stepbrothers and my step-grandmother and all of them were working for the shadow world. They were of a bloodline lineage that you can say of fallen angels, even though they talk a lot about being Toltecs or and teaching Nahualism, which is spelled Nagualism, which you might have heard about if you ever dug up some books by the very famous also Carlos Castaneda. Talks about these things as well. But this is these beings are in love with the shadows, and it's very hard. Like I talked, you should listen to my part 1 because I do briefly describe the difference between beings that are Satanists and those that are Luciferians. Yeah, there is a difference. But anyway, it's time for me to speak out more about this. Like, as I mentioned in part 1, when I was listening to Anya Wick, who is Jeffrey Epstein's niece, reveal, and she is from a purely satanic bloodline and background, and God bless her. But as she said, that I revealed in part 1, that you have to keep speaking up about this. I know that I really need to keep speaking up about this, especially while Miguel is still alive. Yes, he is on his 2nd heart transplant. I mean, who do you know that has 2 heart transplants within, like a maybe 11-year period? He keeps wearing out his heart because of all the evil and darkness and all the heartbreak that he causes on the earth realm. And yeah, so I do want to be speaking up. I don't want to be someone who's starting to speak up about this and then they say, oh, now you're speaking up about it because now he passed away. No, I want to speak up about it while Don Miguel Ruiz is still in his body. Anyway, so this part 2 from, as I mentioned in part 1, this is from Sean Atwood's YouTube channel. He interviewed Anya Wick, Jeffrey Epstein's niece. I think it was on July 21st, and I watched it and listened to it, and then I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do something with this, and I'm gonna give my own experience as well and interject and give knowledge that I have as well as a very super well-researched being into the who, what, when, where, and why of what's been allowed to run this earth realm for thousands of years, even though, of course, we know Mother, Father, God is always ultimately in charge. But there are cycles that go through all of creations, from the very light to the very dark and back over and over and over again. In my tradition from ancient India, they're called yugas, Y-U-G-A-S, cycles. And we are coming out of the darkest cycle called the Kali Yuga, and we are transitioning into the very amazing light yuga called the Sai Yuga, S-A-I Yuga, 1,000 years of peace and prosperity. And Sai really means truth. It's the truth time, the truth of what we really are, the reclamation of the true humanity. And it's the end times for the evils. It's the end times for the satanic rule and all of the satanic minions and Luciferians. It's the end times for them. They call themselves elites. That's what they call themselves. And sometimes, I have to refer to them as that just to underscore that the beings that have been in power, but they're not elite. They act pretty scummy, pretty low and heavy. So they're under great delusions because there's no reward for what they do. And it's all pretty dark, but we're still in the battle. The goodly and godly are still in the battle here. It's in the battle in heavenlies, in the cosmos. It's also, in other realms. It's not just in the earth realm. It's a very powerful battle. It's a corporeal battle, but more it's a battle for the minds of beings and humans, and it's a battle for the souls. It's very important, but the light does win. No doubt about that. Don't doubt that. But that doesn't mean that we don't have challenges and we don't have speed bumps and roadblocks on the way. I know, I can guarantee anyone who's listening to this, doesn't matter what level of society that you're from or what you do for a living or don't do for a living or whatever. I know that this has been very rocky for all beings these past several years. This is great change on the earth realm, but it's for the best. Like I keep saying, and I want to keep claiming this, the apocalypse from the Greek means the great unveiling. It's the great unveiling. It's the time to know real truth, not the faked history that is taught in our corrupted universities and colleges and high schools and elementary schools. It's not the false knowledge. We need to know the truth, and it does go hand in hand with spirituality, because everything is spirit that is incarnated into the material. Everything comes from spirit, from the no thing into the thing of any realm, of any planet, of any universe. So spirituality is a part of everything. It's not about religion, it's spirituality. And the knowledge of oneself about where one came from, why one is here, where one is going when one drops the body. That's the essential enlightenment knowledge to have. It's foolish to think that that isn't the most important thing. We just live, so blindly. But those times are changing. So God bless you all. So going to Anya Wick, I had talked about at the part of part one, I said I'd talk about it a little bit later, but I had mentioned I'm going to say two things briefly, just because I didn't finish this topic. When I talked about Jessie Zebotar, spelled Jesse, and her last name is spelled Czebotar, the wonderful being who is a chaplain now. She's does incredible work of Jesus and Mary, but she was from the satanic bloodlines, and she was raised to be a mother of darkness. Go listen to that in part one if you want to. But while I mentioned the Mothers of Darkness Castle in Belgium, I didn't mention the name of it. And the name of that castle is Chateau des Amoureux. That's Chateau, second word DES, third word AMEROIS. And that's deep in the forests of Belgium. So I wanted to identify that. As well, I wanted to mention, because I did mention Disney, and Anya Wick does talk about Disney, because Walt Disney is one of her ancestors, even though that's not his real name. His real name is Arthur Bick, as she says, and as I spelled in the part one. But the castle that you see on the Disney emblem is a castle in Bavaria, southern Bavaria in Germany, near the border of Austria, and it's the Neuschwanstein castle. It's a very satanic castle, and that's used not accidentally as what's called the Disney castle, because Disney is just so dark, evil, and satanic, and just all about indoctrinating our children and doing such crazy things. So now I'm going to go again to Anya Wick, who was talking to Sean Atwood in this interview, and here is Anya Wick speaking. And my memories of these circumstances are still somewhat fragmented. These assaults happened a couple of times a month, and I'm blessed not to remember every detail. But my father was consistent in what he told me. It's hard for me to talk about it. I want to just answer your questions honestly, as my answers align with what I was told and what I have experienced. Now, this is alleged when birth certificates have been forged. It's not something I can immediately research myself. All I have to go on is what lies in my memory of who I have met and what I was told. But to answer your basic question, why my family does this, because it was done to them. Because having one man bear as many children in a generation as possible and forcing them through these traumatic events, they believe it creates a stronger bond, that creates more loyalty, that it keeps people from talking. And I'm going to interrupt here, listener, to say what she's talking about is generational satanic abuse and incest. That's what she's talking about. And our father, as I mentioned in part 1, is Stephen Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, and he, although he pretended that he was only a divorce attorney, he actually had his paralegal running his divorce business, legal business, while he actually ran Viacom, the media conglomerate. And I just wanted to put that back here so that you guys will remember it. Okay, so that keeps people from talking. And for the most part, they're right, because I'm the only one of my siblings who has directly spoken out about this. There are people who have hinted at it in their music. Of course, Justin Bieber has talked about being assaulted by Usher and Justin Timberlake at P. Diddy's parties. But I don't think it's a coincidence they've only gone after Sean Combs and not his other alleged perpetrators who were born into the bloodline. There seems to be a level of protection for people who are simply born into that world, contrasted with people like Sean Combs or R. Kelly, who joined as adults. But I was not in the boardrooms. I was a child on drugs. So I can't tell you exactly who organizes this, exactly how it happens. It's just speculation and memory. Sean: Anya, you're a very powerful speaker, and you're very well researched, and we've had a lot of survivors come on, and we salute you, for the level of detail and knowledge that you have. I think you're the first survivor, perhaps, who's actually detailed how that has continued over the ages. So if you could maybe expand on that a little bit, I think the viewers would find this fascinating. Anya: what specifically would you like expanded on? Sean: so what was the cult the one that you mentioned earlier, the ancient one, the cult of Baal? Anya: yeah, I know very little about it. My family masqueraded themselves as JEWISH publicly. But behind closed doors, at Passover dinners when I was drugged, would admit we are Satanists. Now I can understand the public has caught on to this, but they call them, quote, the Illuminati, end quote. And I find that interesting because Illuminati means illuminated. I perceive the Illuminati, in fact, to be individuals like yourself, even people like Kanye West who have been trying to illuminate people to this. Sean: how prevalent are these Satanists in high society? Are they disguised? Anya: yes. They control so much more than I think I can even understand. I told you my father boasted that his grandfather was Walt Disney. Now, I remember when Viacom bought Fox. But Fox held a hard line on not selling the news station. Stephen Epstein, her father, raged and cried for a month because that would have been a full monopoly on the American news market. And I just want to put a little aside in here, listener, that Fox, the name Fox, Fox, is actually 666. So like everything else you look at, whether it's the Exxon emblem, whether it's the NASA emblem, whether it's, all these emblems for these large corporations, they all have satanic imagery in them. Whether it's like the World Economic Forum, if you look at their emblem, you can, just like Walt Disney, you can draw a 666 through it. They're always showing us what they really are. But of course, we weren't really paying attention. We didn't know what they really were, right? For the most part, we didn't until we do. And, but the satanic elites and their minions, all of them that have been involved in this infiltration, dark infiltration of our earth realm, and these infiltration of human, all of our foundations and organizations and governments and everything across the board, they believe that in their religion, they have to tell us what they're doing. So they tell us in movies, they tell us in books, they tell us in imagery, in sigils and in emblems. And so they believe they're absolved of negative karmas for all the hideous crimes against humanity that they do. They believe that they can say, well, we told you, we gave you a chance to realize what we were doing, and by not stopping us, that means you gave us your approval, your tacit approval. We showed you in movies like Saw, horror movies, we showed you in many things what we really do. but you didn't look into it. You didn't say, oh, really? Let me check this out. You didn't follow through with it. So that's on you. And we don't have any negative karmas, and we'll just continue doing our agendas. And, we can't be blamed for your ignorance and stupidity. That's what they believe. Of course, they are not excused from that hideousness, but they just believe that. And they trick a lot of people. Like the devil's so tricky. So tricky. Always, like for all these beings that follow the darkness, that follow the devil, that gave up everything for it, and they believe they can have a place, like, that they will be like, oh, I'll be so powerful, I'll be sitting on the throne next to the dark one. And it's just so stupid, because they don't realize, of course, the very foundation of the devil, the very foundation, whether it's the aspect called Satan or the aspect called Lucifer, the beings that go against God is because of their ego and pride, and because they felt rejected, like they want to be as great as the Mother, Father, God, Creator, and they can never be. So they're pretending to themselves, and they're saying, I'll just do my own kingdoms, and I'll be the most powerful ruler of all, and I'll conquer God and all divinity and ruin all of the divine creations, which are, humans are a part of that, as well as other beings. And I'll prove that I'm the best. So that's a lie. Everything is just based on a lie. And the darkness, out of Satan and Lucifer and all the satanic elites and bloodlines of the serpent and, children of Cain and all of this, they willfully turned against Mother, Father, God. God did not turn against them, because of course everything, even the darkness, is created by Mother, Father, God. There's no creation that's not created by Mother, Father, God. And we have choice. So we have choice between the dark and the light, and we're all made of a different recipe of those things, but we have choice which path we're going to follow or not follow. So these beings, they can't create. That's why they use humans. They use us, like all this imagery that they put in our films and television programs and streaming and all these video games and all this, the education and in the books and in the music and everything. They're seeding our consciousness with this, whether it's conscious or subconscious, because they know that when we have that in our third eye consciousness, married with great emotion, that's how we create. So we're actually pulling this nightmare into our earth realm, into our direct experience through that. That's any good, I don't mean good as in good, but any proper black magician knows that they use us for their satanic creations and to make it go from no thing into thing in that aspect. Anyway, so let me get back to this Anya Wick talking about her father, Stephen. He cried for a month because that would have been a full monopoly on the American news market. I remember meeting all sorts of politicians, American and foreign, and entertainers. And as far as that goes, I'm happy to answer honestly if you want to ask me about specific people. But I'm very scared to name individuals if I am unprompted. And then Sean says, yeah, if you say you've met somebody, let's see. Wait, I wonder if Sean was the one saying this. Yeah, if you say you've met somebody, there's no legal consequence. Oh, Sean did say this. Sean said, yeah, if you say you've met somebody, there's no legal consequences of that. Yeah, so if you want to tell us who you've met, and the viewers can just imagine, what was happening. And then Anya said, well, for your viewers across the pond, because Sean Atwood is British, Anya said, I do have fragments of memory of only once meeting the royals on the one trip I took with my family over to the UK. It must have been in 2005 or 2006. I can't remember if it was the summer. I went into the 8th grade or into the 9th grade. I've met everyone who has been an American president in my lifetime, including Donald Trump, who I have to say looked like he was at a funeral when he was at the inauguration the second time around. So I don't think he wanted any part of it. I have met the Kardashians, which is why I believe Kanye West has appeared to have gone off his rocker. I have met Harvey Weinstein the same night I met Jeffrey and Ghislaine, that means Ghislaine Maxwell, and he wouldn't make eye contact with me. He did not want to she says that, wait, I'm interrupting here, because even though Anya Wick, Jeffrey Epstein's niece, is saying this, like I said in part 1, she is has been drugged since she was an infant and on LSD a lot and been MK Ultra. She does not do any research into anything else. She's only talking about her direct experience, and she's making these suppositions up, even though she doesn't know Jeffrey Epstein very well when she says this. But I just have to give what she said. But she casts more of a forgiving definition on her uncle, and he is very guilty, and he does hideous crimes against humanity, against the babies and children, all of that stuff in many different aspects. But like, as I stress in part one, what she said was true in that he was a pawn. Yeah, he wasn't the boss, neither was Ghislaine Maxwell. You know, they are not the top bosses, but they did the most hideous things you can imagine. So let me go back to what Anya's saying. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. He did not want to participate in the abuse of the small children. And I'm sorry, I just have to say, that is such a crock. He definitely participated in the abuse of small children. Yes, he did. But anyway, Anya's saying, I believe that's a man who is behaving as most... Oh, she was talking about, Harvey Weinstein there. He did not want to participate in the abuse of the small children. I believe that's a man who is behaving as most Hollywood producers do. Which doesn't make what he did with those actresses okay, but it looks to me like this is a man who was an easy scapegoat, who wanted to expose what takes place with children in the industry and with our family. So that was what she said about Harvey Weinstein. My twin brother was raised on the Disney Channel. That was painful for me. We were separated when we were 4, and I didn't see him until he was on TV. And listener, she's talking about Shia LaBeouf, the actor Shia LaBeouf. You can look him up if you don't know who that is. With the pilot episode in which he pimps out his sister for a trading card, there's a sequence of shots where the words Royal Tycoon flash on screen, followed by a clip of the gross, nerdy boy he tricks into going on a date, and then he plunges himself into a baby's crib. Oh my God. And he's been in the media for making trouble, Shia LaBeouf has, on sets, and abusing his partners, and not saying his behavior is justified, but when you consider what someone like that goes through as a child and the separation issues that are put on them, it makes sense why abusive behavior is then repeated. You know, I pray for him regularly. I'm anxious to talk about my siblings because they are victims, especially when, like, I want them to feel that it is safe for them to speak up, but I don't want to feel like I am betraying them by naming them directly either. I've already talked about this on my TikTok channel. Yeah, listener, you can go on Anya Wick's TikTok channel. It's called Anya Wick. I've talked a little bit about Shia, but last time I saw my mama, I was getting RAPED by Larry David. And she's naming that old actor Larry David that you might know from Seinfeld show and his own comedy show and this and that. It's that Larry David. And he's also a producer. Anyway, she said, you know, it sounds like a comedy almost, and I've used it as a comedy line. I enjoy my stand-up. It's healing for me, but I decided before coming on here, I wasn't going to, with few exceptions, I didn't want to name anyone unless you asked me about them. Sean, I think the viewers will be very curious then about Jeffrey, and what's your view on his role in the apparatus? Anya, my understanding is that I met him in Aspen in 2007, and that was a reintroduction. My father said, hey, remember your Uncle Jeffrey? And Jeffrey said, hey, Anya, it's great to see you again. Glenn was there. What they told me was that Jeffrey worked for Stephen, her father, and as I've said, he's guilty for what he did to those girls here in New York City and down in Florida and St. Andrews. But I don't believe he was in charge of orchestrating what has gone on in our family for generations. I believe he wanted to talk more about the other parties involved, and I know he didn't unalive himself. I'm not sure whether they let him go and get plastic surgery and flee the country, or if they did unalive him. But I do believe he was a pawn and that his story blew up in the media to keep people from looking beyond him. If Jeffrey was the one villain in charge of it all, then, he's unalived. It's all over. Everything's good now. And that leaves my father free to continue RAPING 3-year-olds and running Viacom from behind a veil while his paralegal runs his divorce practice, as he bragged about to me growing up. Sean, so you're saying that Jeffrey wasn't involved in the full-on occult practices. He was just part of a machine, and then they just used him to make an example out of. Anya, he was involved in the full-on occult practices, but not necessarily of purely his own volition. I have memories of men being forced to assault me when they didn't want to. I remember one man, this brilliant comedic actor, actually his better dramatic work, my father screaming at him, telling him to penetrate me, and he makes one thrust and backs away, and my father gets outraged and says, "You're going to C-O-M-E. You're going to C-O-M-E." And this poor man is crying throughout it, and I'm barely conscious. Here Anya says something about Jeffrey doing the full-on occult practices, but not fully only being hardcore, really sexually attracted to little kids, like some beings that's all they want to have sex with. But Jeffrey did those things, but she thinks that when it came to the really, really little kids, that he was doing it as part of the satanic practices, and not just like he would do it on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday, on a Thursday, whatever, just because he loved it so much. But from the much interviewing of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims, which range from infants to prepubescents and to some teenagers that were 15 and 16 years old. I mean, those two beings just did everything to everyone. So I just have to put this in here. Anyway, Sean said, so in terms of Maxwell then, what do you think her role was? And Anya said, I think she enjoyed it, much like my stepmother did. I think she was as guilty of pedophilia as Jeffrey was, but I didn't know her very well. I don't even remember conversations with her. I remember seeing her. I think she got off on the power of it. I think with men who engage in pedophilia and hebophilia, that was a new word for me, listener. That means when you're sexually attracted to the RAPE of kids who are age 11 to 14 years old. It's more of a sickness that arises from their own abuse. Like my grandfather, my alleged grandfather, Walt's son, who worked for the CIA allegedly and faked his unaliving to remove himself from my mother because he was so sickened by what he could not control doing to her. I contrast that with my stepmother, who delighted in abusing me and laughed at me when I was incapacitated, and the drug they had me on made fun of me drooling on myself, being unable to speak. I think with her and with Ghislaine Maxwell, I'm sure they were abused as children themselves, but there's a different kind of psychopathy that grows within them when they get off on the power of it and abetting in these acts to please their partners. Now, Corey Epstein, that's Anya Wick's stepmother. Now, Corey Epstein was more sexually attracted to me than she was to her husband, Stephen, but she did also do these things in order to stay in good graces with him. And that was more out of survival. Corey was a very broke cellist in her early adulthood with no familial support, whereas Ghislaine, who also comes from the aristocracy, she had access to her own funds independent of Jeffrey. So I can't speculate too much on what she gained out of it from being psychopathic, out of it her psychopathic pleasure in sadism, a schadenfreude of sorts, but I'm not a doctor. She was not a large presence in my life. That speculation in her personality is primarily based on what I know about my stepmother. Sean, so would you say then that some of the techniques used on you would be classified under the MK Ultra program? Anya, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Sean, could you explain that for our viewers who are not familiar with MK Ultra? Anya, okay. These drugs were administered to me when I was an infant. Macro doses were given every single time I was assaulted, and I was kept on micro doses the rest of the time in my waking life to maintain some control, some separation from my peers. I actually didn't realize until very recently that I was kept on micro doses, a small dose in my regular waking life. And she's talking about LSD mostly, listener. Upon analysis of what would happen when I went on school trips away from Denver for a few days at a time, we would take trips to Washington, D.C. or New York or California. On those trips, after 3 or 4 days, I would actually start getting along with my classmates. They'd be amazed. They'd say, "Wait, Anya, you're really cool and fun, and we like hanging out with you." And I would end up being the center of the group and not understand why suddenly I'm connecting socially. But then we go back home. I'd see my family again, and then the next time at school or at synagogue, I'd feel in my own weird little bubble again. So I was put on these large doses designed to knock me out when I was assaulted. Small doses to keep me complacent the rest of the time. What this did essentially was sever my memory. Everything that happened to me, everything that was boasted about to me that occurred on those large doses was locked away in what I thought was a nightmare fantasy world. I was primarily unconscious for the physical assaults. And if I was awake, I was so high, I thought it was my own nightmares. This ensured I wasn't going to go telling anybody about it. This ensured I thought I was sick, So when they paid a doctor to tell me that my PTSD responses, like jumping when my stepmother touched me, were bipolar, I believed that. I believed it was my fault. When I went to rehab in 2015 and was diagnosed with PTSD, right off the bat, the doctors were frustrated with me because I couldn't tell them what traumatized me. I was beating my head against the wall, and all I had going on in my head. I was stuck on this idea that if I were born male, I would be happier, because my experience of womanhood I knew subconsciously was slavery. MKUltra is the practice of creating slaves with the severed memory, many of whom were my siblings, who I only got to see at family reunions, who I would rush home from school to watch on TV. Me and Shaya are not the only twins. Most of us are separated. I think I'm one of their only unsuccessful experiments, because what they do is they take one of the twins, make them a child star, and watch the other hone their craft independently so they can rise to the level to reunite with them as adults. And it works because going through that trauma together, no one else can understand it. And that's part of the reason why I've been so anxious to do this podcast. There's still a door for me that I can push open if I choose to stop exposing this industry where people who love me want to see me again. And they do love me. I know I'm in a situation where I'm struggling right now, but they still can't call me up because that would be to acknowledge how we met each other, right? But they do love me. I remember in high school, one of my younger brothers brought to me to one of the reunions this little metal card he made in his metal shop class. Engraved on one side was his name, and on the other side was the name of my boyfriend. And he said, "I made this for you so you can try to remember. Hide this on you. Hide this in your underwear or in your bra so you can find it when you get back to the house in Denver. Don't let your parents see. Don't let your brothers see." And it works. After the drugs had worn off, I found this, and I remembered who those boys were to me, and I started packing up bags so I could run away to Hollywood. But my younger brother found it and showed it to Kari, her stepmother, who gave me anesthesia and threw it away. My family does this. They do MKUltra because forging these trauma bonds forges more loyalty. And 99 times out of 100, the victim will choose being with other victims over trying to speak to eventually prevent this being done to more victims. And I'm talking to you because the children who are going through this right now one day are going to wonder why nobody cared enough to try to stop it, to try to say something. Now they'll either find me or they will choose to keep their mouths shut because they will understand why, for the most part, victims of MKUltra choose loyalty over truth. That's why. Sean, yeah. Anya. And it allows them to maintain media control. The first thing you see when you walk into Stephen and Kari's house is a giant poster of Vladimir Lenin. They boasted that one of my brothers is in fact the oldest son of the Queen of Jordan, where I have been. Now that's just alleged, but if it's true, it could explain why Israel and Jordan are allies. And considering that, and considering my father's love for all things Russian, it makes it look as though all of these wars are just for show, designed to keep public perception off this sphere of control and to keep money circulating through different industries. Sean, So, Anya, why did you decide to start speaking out, and what challenges have you faced? Anya, I decided to start speaking out because I don't want any children in my family to have to continue growing up wondering why they don't think that's their real mother or real father. Because I can't stand the pain of knowing what those girls named Pain and Help are going through. And the challenges I faced are what I've described with loyalty, with wanting to see my siblings, and maybe wondering, okay, is it better for those children going through this same abuse now to simply have a loving adult in some capacity in their lives? Or for them to grow up and know someone tried to speak for them? I'm still split in half on that. The consensus in my soul about what is the right thing for those children is as split as my memories used to be. Other challenges, it's you look at me and say, oh, well, that's not true. She's crazy. 90% of the people who found me on TikTok know I'm telling the truth. Look up a photo of Shaya's mother and see that we are identical. I think she means Shaya himself, not the mother. Anyway, they understand that you cannot Google the truth if someone is claiming the official records have been forged. But of course, the only proof I possess is in my DNA. Getting anyone to do a test isn't something I can do. I moved back to New York City because my ex-husband had a scheme to try to allow me to speak about some of this in court, since court testimony can be used as evidence to potentially open up criminal cases. But when I got to the hearing, I was only allowed to say my name and address, and the judge refused to let me speak beyond that. When we had gone to the FBI a couple of years ago, they interviewed my father and said, oh, he said nothing happened, so we're going to close the case. It's incredibly easy to paint me as insane, and my answer to that is, why would I choose to talk about something so vile if it weren't real? I'm not profiting from this. If I choose to let this interview go, I'm cutting myself out of the only industry I've had any sort of talent in. And people I am closest to. It's fear. I cannot convince people that Sean Combs was not acting alone. When I don't have proof, I don't have the video. It's probably at Larry David's house, I wasn't able to record the ceremonies at Bohemian Grove because I was rope bound. They set up the abuse in a way to guarantee I was not going to be able to collect evidence while going through it. All I have is my word and my DNA. Sean, so we had an ex-wizard Satanist from Bohemian Grove on a couple of weeks ago, and he told us a story about the Clintons at Bohemian Grove. Do you have any experience of the Clintons at Bohemian Grove? Anya, I have met both of them and their daughters. Interesting that she says plural daughters at Bohemian Grove and at resorts in Colorado. They love going to ski lodges in the off-season. They were not there in Aspen in 2007 after the comedy festival. That's one I remember most vividly. But it's all fuzzy. I don't know if we were in Steamboat or in Breckenridge, but I have met them a few times, and there was a name she said that was blanked out on Sean's interview. Boasted all the time about how well she got along with Bill. She boasted about that even when we were sober. Sean, so Bill tried to distance himself from Jeffrey. Do you think there was a lot more going on between them? Anya, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't tell you what exactly, but Bill was on the flight logs because he went to the island. He also went to many, many other orgies where me and other children were present. It's just fact. Sean, yep. And that's what Virginia, and Sean is referring here, listening to Virginia Giuffre. And I did a series that I'm still needing to finish up, several-part series called Virginia Giuffre's Dead Man Switch. You can go on my YouTube channel and scroll down. I did several parts of that series, and I do have to continue it because I promised people that I would reveal more things, talking about Tom Hanks and talking about Rachel Chandler, child handler, and revealing more things that went on Epstein Island. So I still am going to do that. But Sean said, yep, that's what Virginia said as well. Anya, and then Anya says, yes. And Sean says, do you think the unaliving of Virginia is suspicious? And Anya said, say that again, pardon me. And Sean said, do you think the unaliving of Virginia is suspicious? And Anya says, yes, I do. Of course, to survive a car crash and quote unquote be unalived, end quote, in her home a few weeks later, ... I don't remember ever meeting Virginia, but that doesn't mean I didn't. She may have been a cousin or a sister. I don't know. But I know she spoke to the truth about what Jeffrey and Glenn put her through. And I think she was gearing up to speak more. I do not think that unaliving was a coincidence. I do not believe that that was suicide. She had 2 young children. She had 2 young children, and she had already dedicated her life to speaking for other victims. There is no reason she would have unalived herself. Sean, would you say that these politicians who are compromised, it's of a se-actual nature mostly? Anya, when people... Oh, before I say this, listener, I wanted to interject because I have mentioned it on my Controller series or on my Real series, but I want to put it here for you guys to hear. You know, Bill Clinton, you have to listen to part 1 of this Anya Wick series, because I did talk about what the satanic elites, the evils and their minions, how they hide their bloodlines in other families. Bill Clinton was a bastard child he's a Rockefeller, or he was. He's not walking on the earth right now. Crimes against humanity and treason are capital crimes. He was a grandson of Winthrop Rockefeller and spent every summer summering at Winthrop Rockefeller's compound in Maine with all of his other little cousins, including one of his cousins. Hillary Clinton was born Kelsey Bush. I've seen the photographs. You know, they're all Khazaria Mafia, but they hide their children and their bastards in different families so that you don't know who they are. But they still keep their allegiance and their big net of control. And they meet each other at rituals and all these kind of things. But Kelsey Bush, that was Hillary Clinton, one of the Bushes. And if you don't know, it's time to know that George Bush, you know, George W. Bush, who was married to a man, a Baphomet, Barbara Bush. I mean, there was no feminization of Barbara Bush. That was just basically, you know, he just put some lipstick on and pearls. And that man called Barbara Bush was the son of a very huge devil called Aleister Crowley. And if you don't know who Aleister Crowley is, it's time to know, because that is a huge devil there. And Barbara Bush had a sister who was known as the actress Betty White. So yes, Betty White, who we thought butter couldn't melt in her mouth, you know, the sweet little sweetheart, was a huge Satanist and part of this whole thing as well. And I mean, I'm sorry to say that, because many people said, oh no, I love Betty White. But Betty White was the sister, her brother was named Barbara Bush, and they are part of the satanic bloodline Khazaria Mafia Bush family, whose actual, you know, the Khazaria Mafia always changes their surnames. They do it after a few generations, because then you can't track their misdeeds and their crime and their evil as easily. You don't connect the dots so easily. But they are the Scherfs, SCERFS, the Scherf family. They are not only British nobility, their line also goes through German lines. So that's who they are. Yes, directly related to the satanic British royal beings that took the fake name Windsor, like Elizabeth and Charles and all of them. No, they are not only imposters and usurpers of the true throne of Britain, but they are Saxe, Coburg und Gotha, and they only changed their name to Windsor in the early 1900s, when it was they didn't want to be linked to the Nazi. They didn't want to expose their links to that in the German roots, so they stopped being Saxe, Coburg und Gotha and took the name Windsor. And as Prince Charles, when he was walking on the earth, because he's not around either, when Prince Charles was walking on the earth, he used to openly brag that one of his ancestors that they revered was Vlad the Impaler. Yeah, who we know as called Dracula. Real vampiric bloodline and a terrible, terrible being. And he would, they claim that with honor. Yeah, that's our ancestor. Okay, so back to this Anya Wick reading. So Anya says, so when Sean asks, would you say that these politicians who are compromised, it's of an sexual nature mostly? And Anya said, if a politician is not born into the cult, they are forced to engage in criminal acts or submit themselves so that those that are born in trust they cannot snitch on what they are witnessing because the families got dirt on them. So we see the same thing in Hollywood and in the music industry. There's a long tradition of, for example, black men wearing dresses after they make it famous. It's not because they're forced to wear a dress. And I'm interjecting here to say I highly disagree with that. They are forced. It's a humiliation ritual, and they are forced to do it. Otherwise, they don't work. So, yeah, they don't just freely agree to it. But Anya Wick says, because they're using that to communicate with each other and tell their viewers, I had to submit to get here, which Sean said, which takes us to the portrait of Bill Clinton in the dress at, Sean said, which takes us to the portrait of Bill Clinton in the dress at Jeffrey's house. And he means Jeffrey Epstein's huge mansion townhouse that he bought for $1 from the owner of Victoria's Secret. And there's many portraits there, but there's a huge multicolored dress of Bill Clinton in a vivid blue dress, sitting sideways in an armchair, wearing red pumps, and I think pearls too. But so Sean says, which takes us to the portrait of Bill Clinton in the dress at Jeffrey's house. What was the significance of that? And Anya said, Bill has engaged in sexual acts where he was on the receiving end. And there's the metaphorical submission. And I mean, I'm saying, and literal submission as well. But I mentioned in some of my controller series or real will series, I mean, it's such a gross fact, but the Luciferians and the Satanists, they consider that you can look into the Freemasonic, the infiltrated satanic Freemasonic rituals. The lower level Freemasons don't know about this. You have to be higher up. But, gosh, they believe that you get the true enlightenment through the ANUS, through those acts. And part of that is that when you do that to infants and small children, you are doing a kind of brain splintering and kind of an MK Ultra, because the trauma of that and the shock of what that does and the Kundalini energy in that, when you do that, it has a energetic reaction, but it also splinters the children's mind, like the mind tries to do to protect the infant or the child from trauma. This is a survival response that the mind does, and that's how you create split personalities. But it's also how you create, whether you're doing secret soldiers or you're doing Manchurian candidates or you're doing sex slaves, that go and have these relations with presidents, vice presidents, prime ministers, top people, and they are programmed that some of their personalities are acting as recording devices, so they just record everything. And when their handler gives them the correct hand gesture or word to unlock that, they can just unlock like just a recorder, like a computer, relock and relay exactly all information from the pillow talk or whatever was revealed. And that's something that's been very prevalent. Kathy O'Brien, you should look her up. She talks about that. A very amazing being. She gives a lot of great testimony. One of her books is called The Transformation of America, and she spells it TRANCE, transformation. Kathy O'Brien, look her up. She was groomed with MK Ultra since she was born out of a bloodline satanic family in the Midwest, and she was raised as what they call a presidential model, has many experiences with the presidents, and I suggest you look her up. So anyway, Anya said, Bill had to submit in one way or the other. That's the significance of the dress. And then Anya says, I'm so excited to keep telling my story to help people heal from their pain. And what hope can you give people? That's why. It's not the best outlet for my own healing, but it's the best way I can help others with theirs and make something beautiful ripple out of the pain that we were all put through. The more people talk about it, this, the less likely it is to cycle through history, especially men. I do believe men who are victimized are way more likely to become perpetrators themselves. I know 60% of men in prison experience child sexual abuse, and that's because it's so stigmatized. They don't talk about it, and if they don't talk about it, they can't heal from it. And when they don't heal from it, they crave reliving it, but they relive it from the other side of it, taking back that power that was taken from them. It makes sense to a sick man. I don't want there to be any more tortured little girls. And I'm interjecting here, listeners, saying, or tortured little boys, because it's both of them. Anya says, I don't want there to be any more tortured little girls. And I say, because the... oh no, that's the end. Those were my notes that I wrote. And I say little boys. And then I talked about, again, to make a note of talking about how that special enlightenment that comes through, that I just talked about, through the AUNS, through the forced RAPE of that, which you will also see. That's, I said this before, and you have to have this information. I know it's hideous, but when you look on our $1 bill, and I'm sure most people have seen that satanic Freemasonic pyramid with the capstone floating above the pyramid with the eye, the all-seeing eye of Satan, and that they also call the Eye of Horus, and but that's a different story about that. But it's supposed to be the all-seeing eye of Satan, but actually what it really is, if you go and what they believe, I'm not making this up, this is what they believe, they're showing that the true eye of Satan, the true eye that you receive enlightenment with, is the eye that you find on the human body called the ANUS. That's what is penetrated forcibly with great shock and harm and trauma, and they believe that that's what kind of forces humans to go to different places within themselves, and there's like a chemical, electrical, emotional, huge trauma response that does things to the little babies and children and teenagers or whomever that experience that, and the Satanists and the Luciferians value that. So that's that gross secret of what that is. Yeah. Maybe that can help you understand some things about, we see some forced agendas going on right now. Anyway, that's the end of this. I'm going to end this clip here now. And I'm saying I end all of my clips with the 3 opening prayers that are in Sanskrit and Telugu. And they are short. And what I'm saying is, God bless all beings in all worlds. So I'm saying... excuse the door shutting, I just had to walk out of a place. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yes, peace, peace. That's what we're all looking forward to. God bless you and yours. I'm sending you much love and big hugs to you and yours. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you when I see you. And bye-bye for now.